It started on a night like any other, or so I thought. She was standing by the mirror, touching up her makeup with the kind of precision that spoke more of a seduction than a casual night out. Red lipstick, the kind she hadn't worn in months, painted her lips with a deliberate stroke. Her hair, usually thrown up in a messy bun on lazy weekends, was now cascading in perfect waves down her back. The dress she wore clung to her like a second skin. It was a deep red velvet, hugging her in all the places I used to call mine. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "You're really going all out tonight," I said, my voice casual though my suspicions simmered just beneath the surface. She barely glanced at me, her attention fixed on her reflection. "It's just a night with the girls," she replied, her tone too light, too forced. "Don't wait up. I'll probably crash at Stacy's. You know how we get after a few drinks." Her life slipped out so easily. There was nothing more to say. No amount of begging or pleading could change what had already happened. She had made her choice and now she had to face the consequences. I turned and walked away, her sobs as I walked to the car. I heard my footsteps echoing in the distance. I had done what I came to do. I had taken back control and made her feel the weight of her betrayal in the most public way possible. As I drove off into the night, the city lights blurring past me, I felt a strange sense of peace, not happiness, not yet, but peace. The kind that comes when you know you've done what needed to be done, even if it came at a cost. I was free now, free from the lies, free from the doubt, free from her. As for her, she would have to live with the ruins of the life she destroyed. This wasn't just revenge. It was justice. And I had no regrets. I gave her credit for that, but that would all end soon as the evening wore on. I made my move. I tapped my glass, drawing everyone's attention, and the room fell silent. She turned toward me, her eyes sparkling with the anticipation of whatever surprise I had planned for her. "Thank you all for coming tonight." I began, keeping my voice calm and measured. "It's a special night for a special woman, and I wanted to share something with all of you." I turned to the projector, holding up I put together a little video to celebrate her birthday. A look back at some of her recent memories. She smiled, beaming with pride, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit the room. The projector came to life, and the first few seconds were nothing but a black screen. Then the hotel room appeared on the screen. Room 217. There she was, walking in with her lover. They were laughing, kissing, undressing each other in front of the camera. The room was filled with gasps. She froze, her smile vanishing as her face turned pale. What is this? She wasn't just having some fling in secret corners of the city. This was. It was just another day at the office. The hotel was practically their meeting ground, their twisted version of normal. While I sat at home, I believed every lie she told, but not anymore. I stood up from the table and paced around the room. As memories of the past few months started to stack up in my mind, it all seemed so obvious now. How had I been so blind? The late nights, the excuses, the sudden change in her wardrobe. I'd noticed the business trips, the sudden change in her wardrobe, and the excuses that no longer made sense. It was a pattern, a rhythm she had perfected over time. The worst part was that she didn't even bother hiding it well anymore. That was how little she thought of me, how little she thought I was paying attention. I could feel the anger rising. I was inside, but I pushed it back down. I couldn't lose control. The confident, manipulative woman she had been moments ago was gone. Now she was just a wreck, clinging to the last fragments of her world. She whispered, her voice broken. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "Why?" I repeated the word cold in my mouth. "You're really asking me that after what? You've done this." She took a few steps towards me, her hands trembling as she reached out like she was still trying to fix something that couldn't be repaired. "I can explain," she stammered. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. It just happened. I never meant for it to go this far." I laughed, then a low bitter laugh. The laugh that had been building in my chest for months finally came. You never meant for it to go this far. Do you even hear yourself? You thought you could keep lying and sneaking around, and I'd never know. That's what you meant. Her face crumpled as she started to sob. Her body was shaking with the weight of her own guilt. I'm sorry. Her hair, which had been styled perfectly the night before, was now loose and messy, betraying the long night she'd had. As soon as she caught sight of me sitting in the kitchen with my coffee, she tried to play it cool. She said her voice was casual, too casual. Like she wasn't just sneaking back in after a night of God knows what. She tossed her bag onto the floor. She sat in the chair and headed toward the fridge, opening it as if it could hide her guilt. We had so much fun last night, we lost track of time. Stacy says hi, by the way. The lies rolled off her tongue like second nature. I could almost admire how effortless it had become for her, like some twisted form of art. But I knew where she'd been. I knew who she'd been with, and that she thought I was still the trusting husband who would accept whatever excuse she gave. I replied in a neutral voice, hiding the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. Must have been one hell of a night, she said, smirking and glancing at me over her shoulder. You know how it goes. Too many drinks, stayed up too late. I probably should have just come home. I watched her closely, every movement, every word. She was good, I'll give her that, but not good enough. Did you sleep all right? She asked, her tone light and easy. She grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and took a long sip, as if that would erase whatever she'd done the night before. I slept fine, I replied, taking a sip of my coffee. My eyes never left her. You get much rest at Stacy's? She asked. Her body stiffened ever so slightly, and there was a barely perceptible pause, but I caught it. She recovered quickly. She turned around with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, not much. You know how it is with the girls. We talk, and by the time you know it, it's morning. I nodded and put my coffee cup down, making sure the click of the porcelain echoed louder than it needed to. I said, my voice getting harder, that you thought you could live your little double life. Keep me in the dark and walk away clean. Well, guess what? You've lost. You've lost everything. She collapsed, then sank to the ground in a heap, her face buried in her hands as she wept. I didn't feel any sympathy for her. I crouched down beside her. My voice was low but sharp. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm filing for divorce. You'll be hearing from my lawyer tomorrow morning. Everything's in motion. There's nothing you can do to stop it. Her head shot up. Her eyes widened in horror. No, please, she begged. We can fix this. I'll do anything. Please don't do this. I'll leave him. I'll never see him again. Just please don't leave me. I stood up and looked down at her with cold, hard eyes. You don't get to make promises anymore. This is over. You've destroyed everything we had. And now you're going to have to live with that. She stared up at me, her face a twisted mess of desperation and regret. They rose as they realized the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. But I didn't stop. There was nothing more to say. I had done what I came to do as I stepped outside. The cool night air hit me as a sharp contrast to the tension that had filled the room moments ago. I could hear the murmur of voices behind me rising. It turned into a chaotic hum as everyone started to realize what had just happened. Her birthday party had turned into something far darker than anyone could have imagined. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving a cold, steady satisfaction. I had planned this perfectly and it had gone off without a hitch. It all went off without a hitch. She was blindsided and exposed in front of everyone she cared about. There was no coming back from this. I didn't wait for her to follow me outside. I knew she would. She had no choice. Sure enough, after a few minutes the door creaked open and there she was. Her face was a mess, tears streaking down her cheeks. Her mascara was smeared down her cheeks. But it wasn't for me. It was for him, her lover. He followed behind her, laughing as they moved toward the bed. I recognized him now. He was just some guy. Someone she thought was worth throwing everything away for. They talked for a few minutes. It was just the usual banter. Given that they thought they were alone, it was no surprise when they moved to the bed and started touching each other. I was sitting at home watching them, and it was strange seeing her like that through the lens of a camera instead of through her husband's eyes. She was free and uninhibited, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. When it was over, I closed the feed, my mind racing with what I'd just seen. The truth was undeniable, captured on film and ready for me to use however I saw fit. But I wasn't done yet. The cameras were just the beginning. The next morning I woke up with a new sense of purpose. I'd seen it all with my own eyes, every deceitful second. The address was too much, the anticipation too strong. Part of me wanted to confront her then and there, to wake her up and throw it all in her face, but I knew better. I couldn't blow it now. Not when I was this close. I sat back, closed my eyes for a moment, and let the tension settle. It wouldn't be long now, just 2 more days. The day of her birthday party arrived, and everything was set. I had arranged for a projector and screen to be brought in. She was playing a slideshow of her memories for all her friends and family to enjoy. She had no idea that the only memories that would be played were the ones she had tried so hard to hide. Family and friends filled the room, all smiling and chatting, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. She was at the center of it all, playing the role of the doting wife. She was laughing and mingling with everyone as if nothing had changed. She was good, better than I had given her credit for. I watched as her dot moved across the map, heading toward the city. No detours, no stops, just a straight drive down the highway. I muttered to myself, let's see where you're really going. I told myself I wouldn't follow her, I would just watch and see if she was really meeting up with her. I called my friends, but as I watched that blinking dot moving through the streets, I knew I had to do something. I was tired of being played and tired of the lies, so I grabbed my jacket, slipped into my car, and pulled out of the driveway following her signal. The closer I got, the more my suspicions grew. She wasn't heading downtown, where her girls' night was supposed to be over. She was heading toward the outskirts, where there weren't many options besides a few diners and hotels. I felt the knot in my stomach tighten as the tracker finally stopped moving. It was no surprise where she had parked her car. I said, staring directly into her eyes sounds fun for a second, just a brief. The second I thought I saw a flicker of doubt across her face, maybe she could sense it in the air between us, but if she did, she didn't let it show for long. She quickly brushed it off and moved towards the stairs. I'm going to go shower, she called out, not waiting for a reply. I watched her go, her form disappearing down the hallway, and I let the tension settle in the empty room. She might think she got away with it. She might think this was just another night of deception. Another morning where she could walk back in and pretend nothing happened. But I wasn't the same fool she played for the last few months. I had followed her. I knew exactly where she had spent her night. Once she was out of sight, I grabbed my phone from the counter and opened the GPS tracking app again. The blinking dot marked the location where she had parked her car the night before. At the same hotel. Same lie. But now I had proof she'd been meeting someone regularly. She stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer, I didn't need to. The video said it all. The room fell into a stunned silence as the footage played. Every second was damning. Every frame more incriminating than the last. Her parents. Her friends. Everyone watched in shock as the woman they thought they knew. The video showed her lies. And then it ended. The screen went dark. I stood there, looking at her. The room was still, like death. Happy birthday, darling, I said. My voice was cold, cutting through the silence. She couldn't speak. Her eyes were wide and her hands were trembling. As she tried to speak but couldn't, she knew there was no excuse or lie that could fix what had just happened. Her world had come crashing down, and there was nothing left but the truth. I walked toward the door, surrounded by the stunned faces of our friends and family. Their whispers began to rise as they realized the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. The woman I'd loved and trusted was nothing more than a stranger to me, and built a life with someone who was nothing more than a stranger to me now. It was time to destroy the facade she'd been hiding behind. She came down the stairs as casually as ever, wearing that same expression she always wore when she thought she had me fooled. She kissed me on the cheek, the gesture hollow and mechanical. "I'll be out for a bit today," she said, pouring herself coffee like it was just another normal morning. I nodded, playing along. "Anything special going on?" She replied with a shrug, saying she was just going to do some errands. She said she might meet up with the girls later. The girls were her favorite excuse. They were like invisible friends, always ready to cover for her lies. It amazed me how easily she slipped into the same old routine. She seemed like she didn't have a care in the world, but I kept my face calm and neutral, betraying nothing. I let her think she was still in control. She was sitting outside of a hotel, not one of those luxury places either, just a mid-range one. I followed her to a no-frills kind of place that you wouldn't think twice about unless you were trying to hide something. I pulled into a parking spot a few rows behind her, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. There was no mistaking it. The truth was right in front of me. She wasn't crashing at Stacy's, she wasn't even out with the girls, she was at a hotel not for work. I watched her walk towards the entrance, her hips swaying in that tight dress she used to wear for me, but now it was for someone else, someone waiting for her inside the hotel. The way she moved, the confidence in her stride, it wasn't the walk of a woman who felt guilty. She disappeared inside, and I just sat there in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I was angry, but I held it in. I needed to think and plan. Storming in there and causing a scene wouldn't get me what I needed, not yet. This wasn't going to be some emotional explosion, or a shouting match, where she could twist my words and turn me into the irrational husband. This had to be handled with precision, and cold calculated precision at that. I had enough evidence to know I had the truth on my side, but it wasn't enough to confront her yet. I needed more than just a tracker on her car. I needed proof that would destroy every excuse she could possibly conjure up, something she couldn't deny even if she wanted to. I checked the room one last time, no cameras. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. I could already picture them together, thinking they were safe while I watched every second unfold in real time. I left as quietly as I'd come in. I went in and gave the keycard back to the guard on my way out. He didn't ask any questions, we both knew what was going on. I went back to my car and checked my phone. The camera feeds were coming online one by one. The room was empty, but it wouldn't be for long. I knew she'd be back, and when she did, I'd have her there. While she was busy with breakfast, I was already 2 steps ahead. I was putting the finishing touches to my plan. The footage I'd collected from the cameras was on my phone, ready to be used, but it wasn't enough just to catch her and confront her in private. That wouldn't do. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her betrayal. I wanted her to see the walls close and around her with nowhere to run. What better opportunity than her birthday party? It was perfect. The party had been planned for weeks. Family, friends, everyone we knew would be there. It was a celebration in her honor, but nobody knew, least of all her, that it was going to be a night she'd never forget. All her lies and deception were going to be laid bare in front of everyone. She'd fooled a lot of people, but there was one more thing I needed to do before everything could come together. I had to make sure she wouldn't suspect a thing in the run-up to the big reveal. I needed to play the part of the loving husband for just a few more days. I stayed parked outside for a while, watching as people came and went. They were just normal people, unaware of what was going on behind those walls. My pulse was beating faster in my temples. The betrayal cutting deeper with every minute that passed. But I was patient. That was the key. I pulled up the app again, checking the GPS location and noting the time. And this wasn't over by a long shot. I drove home in silence, the cold night air cutting through the car's interior, but I barely felt it. My mind was somewhere else, calculating and plotting. She thought she could fool me and lie to my face, but she had no idea I was one step ahead of her now. The truth had been uncovered. It was only a matter of time before I exposed her for what she was. I had my proof, and now I just needed more. The next morning she came home just after sunrise, walking through the front door with the same disinterested expression I'd seen 100 times before. Her dress was wrinkled, her makeup was smudged around the edges like she'd slept. No more lies, no more denials, no more deflecting. She'd be caught and I'd have it all on video. I drove home, my mind racing. The trap was set and now I just had to wait. Every part of me wanted to fast forward to the moment of truth, to the look on her face when I revealed what I knew. But I reminded myself to be patient. I told myself that revenge was best served cold and that I had no intention of rushing this. When I got home, she was already there, lounging on the couch like nothing had happened. She seemed like she hadn't just spent the previous night wrapped around someone else in that very hotel room I had just rigged with cameras. She glanced up at my face. She gave me a look that said she was bored and didn't care. "You're home early," she said, still looking at the TV. "Yeah, it was a slow day at work," I replied, forcing a smile. "Oh, you're just here because of that," she said, sounding bored. She didn't even ask how my day was. No surprise there. I almost admired the effortlessness, but the cracks were starting to show. I watched her grab her clutch in her hand, hesitating just long enough to tell me she wasn't as cool as she wanted me to believe. She threw one last glance in the mirror, adjusting the strap of her dress, the same one. She used to wear her clothes for me. There was something different about her tonight, something that had been festering for months. She changed, and not just in the subtle ways. It started with late nights at work, which became more frequent. She took phone calls in the other room and quickly swiped away text messages when I walked in. She became more distant and her smile lost its warmth. We hadn't shared a real conversation in weeks. We hadn't spoken for weeks. Whenever I tried to touch her, she pulled away as if my hands were fire. I knew this wasn't just work stress or getting older. She had a secret, and tonight, I was going to find out what it was. I said be careful, as she moved towards the door. I'd been hiding her betrayal, but this time I was the one with the upper hand. As we drove home, she rested her hand on my arm and gave me a soft smile. "It was a nice night," she said quietly, almost like she was trying to convince herself that everything was still fine, I replied, keeping my voice steady. In my mind, I was already planning the next step. I had to keep the charade going just a little longer. The party was in 2 days, and I needed her to feel completely. I needed to make sure she didn't suspect anything or have any doubts. I wanted her to walk into that room with her head held high, but I knew it would all come crashing down around her that night. After she fell asleep, I sat in the living room staring at my phone. The footage was ready, edited down to the most damning parts. There was no need for subtlety anymore. I had caught them in the act. Every kiss, every touch, every lie. It was all there, and when the time came, it would be unleashed in front of everyone she had been. I couldn't sleep. She was already checked out of this marriage, thinking she was playing this. She had no idea that the cards had already been dealt and that I was the one holding all the aces. The next couple of days were torture. I had to sit through boring conversations, fake smiles, and a strained normalcy that made me sick to my stomach every time she talked about work or her plans with her. I called my friends and I wanted to tell her I knew everything, but I held back. I couldn't rush it, not yet. Then came the night she dressed up again. Same game, same routine, but this time I wasn't just watching her walk out the door. I had the cameras ready as soon as she left. I pulled out my phone and opened the live feed. The hotel room sat empty, waiting. It wouldn't be long now. I watched the dot on her GPS move across the city, slowly heading toward the hotel again. It was the same one, room 2007. Before long the door to the hotel room opened on my screen. There she was, striding in like she owned the place. Her face lit up with a smile I hadn't seen in months. My voice was calm. See you tomorrow, she said. Yeah, I'll be back tomorrow. She tossed it over her shoulder without turning. As she walked away, her heels clicked against the floor, getting fainter as she moved down the hallway. Her scent lingered in the air, sweet, expensive, and unfamiliar. I hadn't bought her anything like that. I followed her to the window and watched her get into her car. The engine purred to life, and she drove off into the night. I stood there watching her taillights disappear down the street, my heart pounding in my chest. But I wasn't. I wasn't going to wait around this time. No more wondering, no more sleepless nights staring at the ceiling. My mind was made up. 3 months ago she'd insisted on installing GPS tracking in both our cars for safety. She'd said, ironically, I agreed, thinking nothing of it at the time. Now it was going to be my weapon. I walked to the living room, grabbed my phone I opened the tracking app we had synced to both our cars. That night, I suggested we go out to dinner. I suggested we get away for a night. I was trying to sound casual, just the two of us. It's been a while. Her face lit up, but not with affection. It was something else. A hint of relief, maybe like she thought I was still buying the act. That sounds great, she said, leaning in to kiss me. But I could feel it now, the hollow behind it, the lack of connection. She was already gone in more ways than one. We went to a nice restaurant, had a decent meal and talked about nothing in particular. She was trying to act normal, and I was doing the same, but there was a tension underneath it all. It was strange, almost surreal, sitting across from her knowing everything I did and yet pretending like we were just a regular couple. I could tell she was trying to figure out if something was wrong. Her eyes kept darting to mine, searching for any sign that I might be onto her, but I kept my cool. I had become a master of hiding my emotions, much like she had. She stuttered, I never wanted to hurt you, I still love you. The words hung in the air between us, empty and meaningless. I stared at her, feeling nothing but a cold detachment. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the one I had fallen in love with all those years ago, she was someone else, someone I didn't even recognize you. I don't care about your apologies, I said, my voice low and steady. You think sorry is going to change anything? You killed this marriage the moment you walked into that hotel room with him. She opened her mouth to speak, but I wasn't finished. You had every chance to come clean, I continued. Every time you walked out that door, I got closer to you. Every night you came home late with some excuse, you had a choice. You could have told me the truth, but you didn't. You chose to lie over and over again. Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't stop. I had held this in for too long, and now I wanted to. I told her every word you thought I was a fool.